You see the headlines, right? The economy is booming, stocks are up. But then you look at your own bills, your own bank account, and you think, am I living on a different planet? Well, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're going to dig into this huge disconnect between the official numbers and how millions of Americans are actually feeling about their money.
And this quote right here, it really cuts to the core of the whole debate. The claim is that your worries about the cost of living, well, they're not real. That it's all just a political game, a con job. But is that really the case?
So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put that claim to the test. We're not going to rely on talking points. We're going to follow the actual data, from polls, from income reports, from the housing market, to see what story it tells us. Is this feeling of financial strain real, or is it just in our heads?
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll take the temperature of the public. Then, we'll look at who's actually winning in this economy and who's getting left behind. After that, we'll tackle the housing crisis, and finally, we'll clear up the confusion about what's really going on with prices.
Okay, let's start with the most fundamental question. How do people actually feel? I mean, if this whole affordability thing were just a con job, you wouldn't expect to find widespread, genuine frustration, right? But that's exactly where our investigation begins.
And what's just wild here is the complete reversal. You go back to 2017, and economic approval was a relative bright spot. But look at it today. It's completely flipped on its head. A massive 62% of people now disapprove. That points to a really deep and growing sense of dissatisfaction.
And we're not talking about a small, vocal minority here. The polling is pretty clear. A broad majority of Americans are not happy with their financial situation. This is our first major piece of evidence that these concerns are real and deeply felt across the country.
And this chart really shows you just how deep this feeling goes. This is the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index. It's basically one of the best vital signs we have for the country's economic mood. And right now, it is at its second lowest point since they started tracking this way back in 1978.
So think about that for a second. People today feel worse about the economy than they did back in 1980, a time when inflation was soaring at almost 15%. This tells us something crucial. The problem isn't just about prices today. It's a profound lack of confidence in the future, in financial security itself.
Okay, so that's the feeling. But why do people feel this way? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is that the benefits of this so-called strong economy just are not being shared. It feels like there's a big party going on, and most of us weren't even invited.
You hear it on the news all the time, right? The stock market is soaring, and that sounds great, but who does that actually help? Well, a staggering 87% of all stocks are owned by just the top 20% of earners. So for the other 80% of us, a booming market doesn't really change a thing in our daily lives.
In this slide, this just lays it all out in black and white. There are two completely different economic realities happening at the same time. For the wealthiest folks, spending power has skyrocketed by almost 50% because their income has just blown past inflation. But for almost everyone else, your wage gains have been almost completely erased by rising costs. You're working hard just to stay in the same place.
And that right there, that's the disconnect. These positive national headlines about a strong economy just don't feel real when your own paycheck is being stretched thinner and thinner every single month.
All right, now let's talk about what is, for so many people, the most tangible, the most painful part of this whole story, the American dream of owning a home, which, for many, has turned into a financial nightmare.
I mean, it's crazy to think that just a few years ago, with super low interest rates, you could get a typical mortgage for around $1,000 a month. But since then, we've been hit with this devastating 1-2 punch. First, home prices shot up over 50%. Then, mortgage rates climbed right behind them. The result? The monthly cost to buy that exact same home has more than doubled.
And that number, 40, that's not just a statistic. That's a stolen decade. The dream of owning a home, something that used to be a milestone for your early 30s, is now being pushed off until middle age. That's a decade of lost stability, lost wealth building, and delayed lives. And if you look at who is able to buy a house now, it's a whole different story. The market is increasingly dominated by older, wealthier people who already own a home and have equity. The average age of someone buying their second or third home is 62. How is a young person supposed to compete with that?
And it's like a double whammy because on top of that impossible housing market, young people are facing a much rougher job market too. The overall unemployment rate might look okay at around 4.2%, but for young adults between 20 and 24, it's more than double that, at 9.2%.
It's pretty hard to save for a down payment when you're struggling just to find a decent job.
All right, last piece of the puzzle, and this one is the big one. We're going to solve the great inflation mystery. If we're told that inflation is way down, why does everything at the store still feel so ridiculously expensive?
Okay, you have to get this part, because it is the key to everything. The single most important word on this slide is rate. Inflation measures how fast prices are going up. Think of it like the speed of a car. It's not about the price tag itself, it's about how quickly that price tag is getting bigger. This is probably the most misunderstood concept in the entire economic debate. Let's use a super simple example. Say a gallon of milk costs $3. Then we have a year of high inflation, and the price jumps to $3.27. The next year, officials say, great news, inflation has slowed to 3%. But that doesn't mean the price goes back down. It just means it goes up slower to $3.37. The higher price is now locked in, and your grocery bill is permanently higher.
So when you hear a claim like prices are way down, it just doesn't compute with your actual experience at the checkout line, right? The rate of the increase has slowed down, which is good, but the actual prices you pay every single day are not down. They're way up from where they were, and they're still inching higher.
So let's circle back to that original question. Is this all just a con job? Well, based on the data we just walked through, the answer is a pretty clear no. We have public frustration at historic highs. We have an economy where wage gains for most people have been swallowed whole by inflation. We have housing costs that have literally doubled, pushing the dream of homeownership back by a decade. These aren't just feelings, they are verifiable facts.
And that leaves us with one last really big question. If the data is this clear, if the lived experience for millions of people is this consistent, why is the conversation we hear from our leaders so often completely out of sync with reality? That gap, the gap between the economic data and the political narrative, that's the real story of the great economic disconnect.